It had no armor, no heavy guns. It looked, by all accounts, like a toy. When it was first presented to the US Army, high-ranking officers laughed. They were insulted. But by 1945, that same toy would be called one of the 3 tools that won the war. This is the story of the Jeep. June 14th, 1940. The Champs, Élysée, Paris. The sound isn't just the rumble of panzers. It's the high-pitched whine of 2-stroke engines, the clatter of motorcycle sidecars, and the rhythmic thud of thousands of jackboots on cobblestone. For the American military attachés, watching from the windows of the US Embassy, this is a nightmare made real. They are witnessing the fall of France. But it's not the tanks that have them terrified. It's the speed of the infantry. The German Wehrmacht is a fluid, mechanized organism. Its reconnaissance units, mounted in light Kübelwagens and BMW R75 motorcycles, aren't just scouting the front. They are the front. They bypass strong points, cut communication lines, and create chaos deep in the Allied rear before the main force even arrives. They move through forests and fields where no truck could go. Thousands of miles away, in a non-air-conditioned office in Washington, D.C., the US Army's top brass is paralyzed by the newsreel footage. Their military doctrine is still stuck in 1918. Their primary light reconnaissance vehicle is a horse. The US Army still has active, horse-mounted cavalry divisions. Their mechanized option, a Harley-Davidson WLA motorcycle. It's loud, it's a big target, and the second a rider needs to fire his weapon, he has to stop, park, and dismount. In the thick mud of a European winter, it's a 500-pound anchor. The Army's other scout cars are just civilian sedans, like the Ford Model T or the Chevrolet VA, painted olive drab. They are heavy, they are 2-wheel drive, and they have the off-road capability of a grocery cart. General George C. Marshall, the Army Chief of Staff, sees the German Blitzkrieg and knows, with chilling certainty, that America is totally unprepared for this new war. He needs a vehicle that can do what the horse did go anywhere, carry a scout, and endure the elements. But he needs it to have the speed of a motorcycle and the utility of a truck. He needs a miracle. On July 11th, 1940, the Army's Quartermaster Corps drafts what is, perhaps, the most demanding technical specification in automotive history. They send an invitation to 135 American manufacturers. The request is for a new, general-purpose vehicle. The requirements are laughable, suicidal even. The vehicle must have 4-wheel drive. It must have a wheelbase of no more than 80 inches. It must be no taller than 40 inches. It must be able to carry a 600-pound payload, the equivalent of 3 soldiers in full kit plus a .30 caliber machine gun. And the most impossible requirement of all, its empty weight must not exceed 1,300 pounds. This 1,300-pound limit is the killer. The Army wants a vehicle that can literally be picked up and carried out of the mud by a handful of soldiers, yet be tough enough to survive a war zone. And then comes the deadline. A working, tested prototype must be delivered in 49 days. A production run of 70 test vehicles must be ready in 75 days. 135 companies receive the invitation. 133 of them essentially throw it in the trash. It's not just difficult, it's physically impossible. 49 days? To design, engineer, fabricate, and deliver a revolutionary new vehicle from a clean sheet of paper? It was madness. Only 2 companies respond. One, Willys Overland, is a major manufacturer, but they are skeptical. Their chief engineer says the 1,300-pound limit is unachievable. They write back, asking for more time and a more realistic weight limit. The other response comes from a tiny, bankrupt manufacturer from Butler, Pennsylvania, a company that built small, cheap civilian cars and was now circling the drain, the American Bantam Car Company. Bantam has no money, no large-scale factory, and only a skeleton crew of engineers. But they have one thing the others don't: desperation. They don't just say they'll try, they tell the US Army they'll do it. They hire a brilliant freelance automotive designer named Karl Probst, who agrees to work for free. The 49-day clock starts ticking. July 17th, 1940. Butler, Pennsylvania. Karl Probst walks into the defunct Bantam factory. It's a cavernous, dusty building, silent save for the echoes of a company on life support. He has 48 hours to create the initial design and 47 days left to deliver a working vehicle to the US Army. There is no R&D department. There is no budget. There is only a small, fiercely loyal team of Bantam mechanics and draftsmen who haven't been paid in weeks, led by Bantam President Frank Fenn. They are all gathered around a single chalkboard. Probst isn't just an engineer, he's a pragmatist. He knows the 1,300-pound weight limit is a fantasy. A four-wheel drive transfer case alone would weigh over 100 pounds. The engine, axles, and frame needed to survive combat would push it far beyond that. But the Army's deadline is real. He begins to draw, not in an office, but on the factory floor itself, working 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and desperation. He sleeps on a cot in the drafting room. This isn't engineering. It's a frantic scavenger hunt. There is no time to design and tool a new engine. Probst and the Bantam team select a 45-horsepower, four-cylinder engine from the Continental Car Company. It's reliable, but it's heavy. There is no time to fabricate custom axles. Probst calls up the Spicer Company and sources Spicer 44 axles, which are actually designed for a Studebaker Champion car. They are rugged, but they are also heavy. The transmission, transfer case, and steering column are all off-the-shelf parts, begged, borrowed, and bought from various suppliers who are told this is a matter of national emergency. The Bantam team is building the prototype by hand, welding the chassis together just yards away from where Probst is still finalizing the blueprints. They are, in effect, inventing the Jeep as they build it. The iconic look of the Jeep isn't a design choice. It's a desperate compromise. Why the flat, slab-sided body? It's the fastest, cheapest way to hammer sheet metal into shape. Why the flat, simple fenders? Probst knows soldiers will use them as workbenches, seats, and stepping stools. Why the low profile and folding windshield? To meet the Army's 40-inch height requirement so it can be hidden in ditches or stacked in transport gliders. As the days bleed together August, then early September the vehicle takes shape. It's small, stubby, and looks almost comical, but it's tough. The team calls it the Blitz Buggy. Then comes the moment of truth. They put the finished prototype on the factory scale. The needle swings and settles at 2,030 pounds. They are 730 pounds over the Army's impossible limit. Probst is heartbroken. He feels he has failed. But it is, quite literally, the lightest a vehicle with these components can possibly be. September 21st, 1940. The 49-day deadline, the Bantam prototype, barely test-driven, is loaded onto a truck. The paint is still wet. The Bantam team, haggard and covered in grease, races the 250 miles to the Army's testing ground at Camp Holabird, Maryland. They arrive at 4:30 p.m. The Army's deadline is 5 p.m. A group of skeptical, stern-faced Army officers is waiting. They look at their watches, then at this strange, tiny thing that Bantam has delivered. It looks like a toy. It's parked next to the Army's standard 1.5-ton trucks, and the officers don't just laugh, they are reportedly insulted that Bantam has wasted their time. The Army's chief technical inspector, Major Harold A. Hart, walks up to the vehicle, clipboard in hand, ready to begin the most grueling test in military history. The Blitz Buggy, now officially the Bantam Reconnaissance Car, or BRC, is about to be driven until it, or its drivers, breaks. September 23rd, 1940. Camp Holabird, Maryland. The Bantam Blitz Buggy is lined up at the base of a test hill. It's a 60% grader, muddy, rutted incline so steep that a man would have to crawl on all fours to climb it. The Army's standard-issue trucks, the 1.5-ton Dodges and GMCs, wouldn't make it a third of the way up. The lead test driver, Sergeant Handlebar Hank, climbs into the tiny Bantam. He's a hardened veteran of the motor pool, and he has a smirk on his face. This is the toy all the officers are laughing at. He revs the small Continental engine. It sounds like a sewing machine next to the roar of the big block trucks. He engages the new Spicer four-wheel drive system, puts the transfer case in low gear, and eases off the clutch. The Bantam doesn't just climb, it scampers. The narrow track wheels find purchase in the muck. The low center of gravity keeps it stable. The little engine, working at its limit, just keeps pulling. It claws its way up the entire slope, over the crest, and disappears. The officer's laughter stops. For the next 30 days, the army does everything in its power to destroy the Bantam prototype. They drive it at its top speed of 55 miles per hour until the engine glows red. They drive it through 18-inch deep mud bogs, over railroad ties, and across boulder-strewn fields. They load it with 3 soldiers and a .30 caliber machine gun fire, exceeding its 600-pound payload limit, and run it 24 hours a day. They drive it, in total, for over 3,400 agonizing miles. The only major failures? A broken steering knuckle and a cracked frame weld. In 3,400 miles of what the Army report calls severe and destructive testing, the Blitz Buggy shows near indestructible reliability. It does things no other vehicle in the US inventory can do. The Bantam team, watching from the sidelines, is ecstatic. They did it. They met the impossible deadline. They passed the impossible test. They have, by all rights, won the contract. But a new, more sinister problem is emerging. The Army officers, now deeply impressed, look at the tiny Bantam delegation. They see Frank Fenn and Karl Probst, desperate car salesman and a freelance engineer. They don't see a company with the industrial might of General Motors or Ford. Bantam's factory, at full stretch, might be able to produce 50, maybe 100, vehicles a day. General Marshall doesn't need 100. He needs 100,000. He needs an arsenal of democracy. While the Bantam is still being brutalized on the test track, the Army makes a fateful and legally dubious decision. They know Willys Overland and Ford have massive, state-of-the-art production lines. The Army needs their power, but Bantam has the design. So, the Army quietly revises the rules. They call representatives from Willys and Ford to Camp Holabird. But they don't just ask them to look at the Bantam. They give them full access. The Willys and Ford engineers, with their own notepads and cameras, are allowed to watch every test, measure every angle, and interview the Bantam mechanics. And then, the ultimate betrayal, the US Army Quartermaster Corps, citing national emergency, takes Karl Probst's priceless blueprints, the 49-day miracle, and simply hands a full set to its 2 biggest competitors. The message is blunt: build this, but make it better. The Army also, crucially, abandons the 1,300-pound weight limit. It's now a much more achievable 2,160 pounds. Willys Overland, led by their own brilliant engineer, Delmar Barney Roos, now has a massive head start. They take Probst's general layout and focus on the one thing they know they can do better: the engine. They have a secret weapon Bantam didn't: the powerful, 60-horsepower Go Devil engine. Ford, with the full backing of Henry Ford himself, jumps in, using its unrivaled ability to mass produce. They call their prototype the Pygmy. The Bantam team, having achieved the impossible, can only watch in horror as their design is stolen, and the 2 largest automotive companies in the world are unleashed to perfect it. The race for the Jeep isn't over. It has just become a blood sport. November 13th, 1940. Camp Holabird. The testing grounds look different now. Where Bantam's Blitz Buggy stood alone just weeks ago, there are now 2 new challengers. The air is thick with tension, not just from the looming war, but from fierce corporate rivalry. This is the final winner-take-all battle of the prototypes. In one corner, the improved Bantam BRC-40. It's the veteran, the one that proved the concept. It's agile, small, and its drivers are fiercely loyal. In the second corner, the Ford Pygmy. It's stamped with the industrial genius of Henry Ford. It's slightly boxier, meticulously assembled, and features an innovative new design: a flat hood, headlights integrated behind the grille, and a simple 9-slot stamped grille that is cheap and fast to produce. In the third corner is the Willys MA, Military Model A. On the surface, it looks almost identical to the Bantam. But the army officers and test drivers know its secret. When the Willys engineer, Barney Roos, had been given Bantam's blueprints, he saw his chance. He wasn't constrained by Bantam's 1,300-pound limit. He took his company's prized possession, the heavy, robust 60-horsepower Go Devil engine, and redesigned the entire vehicle around it. The tests begin again, but this time, it's a head-to-head comparison. The three vehicles are loaded with sandbags, hooked up to 37mm anti-tank guns, and aimed at the 60% mud hill. The Bantam, with its 45-horsepower Continental engine, strains and claws, its engine screaming. It makes it, but just barely. The Ford, with its 46-horsepower tractor engine, performs similarly. Then, the Willys MA takes its turn. The driver engages the 4WD. The Go Devil engine releases a deep, throaty growl, utterly different from the others. With 105 feet plumes of torque nearly double, the Bantam Sit doesn't just climb the hill. It attacks it, churning mud and pulling the heavy gun as if it were an afterthought. The testers are stunned. This isn't just a 15-horsepower difference, it's a difference in character. The Willys vehicle is a brute. The Army's procurement board is now facing a logistical nightmare. The Bantam is the most agile. The Ford is the easiest to mass produce. But the Willys is, by a massive margin, the most powerful and capable. An Army report from the time states it bluntly: the Willys engine is a powerhouse. It possessed sheer, rugged, brute force. General Marshall cannot send 3 different vehicles to war. The spare parts chaos would cripple the Army. He needs one standardized vehicle. In early 1941, the Army makes its choice. The Willys MA is the winner. But the story isn't that simple. The Army, in an act of wartime pragmatism, tells Willys they love their vehicle, but they prefer the features of the Ford. Willys is ordered to create a new, final version. This new model must incorporate the unstoppable 60 HP Go Devil engine, Willys, the general layout and 80-inch wheelbase, Bantam, the flat hood, the folding windshield, and the innovative headlights in grille design, Ford. Willys takes these components and synthesizes them. They change Ford's 9-slot grille to a 7-slot grille. Some say to differentiate it, others say it was cheaper to stamp, creating the face that will launch 1 million ships. This new, hybrid design vehicle is designated the Willys MB. This is it. This is the one. This is the vehicle that will win the war. The Army places an initial order for 16,000 units. The Willys factory in Toledo, Ohio, explodes into 247 production, but 16,000 is a drop in the ocean. As the attack on Pearl Harbor plunges America into the abyss, the demand for the MB skyrockets to hundreds of thousands. The Willys factory, running at full capacity, can't even come close. The Army needs a second source. They turn to the only company on Earth that can match that scale, Ford. In an incredible twist of fate, Ford is ordered to cease production of its own design and become a licensed manufacturer of its competitor's vehicle. The priceless Willys MB blueprints are handed over to the engineers at Ford's River Rouge plant. From 1941 onward, 2 Jeeps roll off the assembly lines. The Willys MB and the Ford GPW government, 80-inch wheelbase, Willys design. They are identical, down to the last bolt. A soldier in the field cannot tell them apart. As for Bantam, the company that invented the entire concept, they are crushed. Too small, too broke, they are pushed aside. They are given a consolation contract to build the small, quarter-ton trailers the Jeeps will tow. The toy that the Army laughed at is no longer a toy. It's the most important piece of hardware in the Allied arsenal, and it's finally heading to war. November 8th, 1942. A beachhead near Algiers, French Algeria. Operation Torch. The first great American amphibious landing of the war in Europe. The scene is pure chaos. LCVPs, landing craft vehicle, personnel, slam into the sand, dropping their ramps into the churning surf. Men pour out, struggling to establish a perimeter. A group of officers is pinned down, huddling behind a small dune. Their 2.5-ton GMC trucks, the Deuce and a Half, are already in trouble. The first one off the landing craft hit the wet sand, its 10 wheels spinning uselessly, and instantly bogged down, blocking the ramp. A motorcycle courier tries to race up the beach, hits a soft patch, and goes flying. The entire invasion is threatening to stall, choked on its own logistics. Then, from the ramp of another LCVP, a new sound is heard: a high-revving whine. A Willys MB, waterproofed with putty and snorkel-like exhaust, hits the water, submerges its hood, and keeps going. Its 4 wheels find the sand, and it scrambles up the beach like an angry crab, water pouring from its chassis. Behind it comes another, and another, a literal swarm of them. The officers who had laughed at Camp Holabird are nowhere to be seen. In their place is a generation of GIs who are witnessing a miracle. A 30 caliber machine gun is already mounted on the pintle of the first Jeep. It races to the high ground, providing immediate covering fire for the infantry. A grizzled sergeant barks at a driver. "You! Get the general!" A young private, his hands white-knuckling the wheel, speeds off, bouncing over shell craters, to retrieve General Patton, who would soon make the Jeep his personal chariot, complete with blaring air horns and oversized rank plates. Within an hour, the Jeeps are the invasion. They are seen towing 37mm anti-tank guns, hauling them through sand and scrub that would have killed a dozen mules. They are seen loaded with stretchers, 2 in the back, 1 across the hood, performing the role of battlefield ambulance, racing the wounded back to the aid stations. They are seen with their windshields folded down, a signal corps radio antenna whipping from the back, acting as a mobile command post for a young lieutenant directing his platoon. They are seen hauling trailers loaded with ammunition, water cans, and K-rations, becoming the single artery of supply between the beach and the rapidly advancing front line. The Germans, and their vaunted Afrika Korps, are stunned. Their Kubelwagen is a brilliant light vehicle, but it's only 2-wheel drive. It can't match this. The American toy goes everywhere. GIs discover it's light enough to be loaded into a C-47 transport plane and dropped with paratroopers in the dead of night. They discover that when it gets hopelessly stuck, 4 men can literally lift it out of the mud. A famous dispatch from war correspondent Ernie Pyle, embedded with the troops, says it all. It did everything. It went everywhere. Was as faithful as a dog, as strong as a mule, and as agile as a goat. It constantly carried twice what it was designed for, and still kept going. Soldiers aren't just using the Jeep, they are customizing it. Medics weld frames to hold more stretchers. Infantrymen weld steel plates to the front for armor. In the Pacific, the 1st Marine Division cuts holes in the hood to feed hot air to soldiers freezing in the jungle damp. They remove the headlights and mount the 50 caliber machine guns, turning it into a fast attack vehicle. The Willys MB and the Ford GPW are no longer just general-purpose vehicles. They have become the soldier's best friend. They are the workhorse, the savior, the pack mule, and the cavalry charge, all rolled into one 2,160-pound package of olive-drab steel. The laughter has completely and utterly died. In its place is a desperate global demand. Send more Jeeps. Winter 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. The snow is 3 feet deep, and the air is so cold it cracks the steel on tank treads. This is the Battle of the Bulge. A 1st Infantry Division patrol, 4 men in heavy wool overcoats, are shivering violently behind a snowdrift. Their breath freezes in the air. They are cut off, their radio is dead, and a German Tiger tank is rumoured to be hunting in this sector. Then, they hear it. Not the high-pitched whine of a German 2-stroke, but the low, reliable chug of a Go Devil engine. A lone Jeep, painted white for winter camouflage, materializes out of the blizzard. The driver, a corporal from the Signal Corps, is half frozen, but he's there. He has a spool of comms wire in the back and a fresh battery for their radio. He found them by following a frozen creek bed, a path no other vehicle could have taken. Communication is restored. The line is held. This small, seemingly insignificant act is being repeated 1,000 times over across the entire world. The Jeep is no longer just a vehicle. It's the lifeblood of the Allied advance. In Italy, it's seen climbing the sheer, mule-track mountain passes of the Apennines, dragging guns up slopes so steep that drivers had to tie themselves to the steering wheel to keep from falling out. On the Eastern Front, the Jeep becomes a legend for a different army. Under the Lend-Lease Act, the US ships over 50,000 Jeeps to the Soviet Union. The Russians, who are used to heavy, unreliable hardware, are astonished. They call it the Willys, pronouncing it Willys. It becomes the preferred transport for Red Army commanders, scouts, and artillery spotters. They drive it through the endless mud of the Rasputitsa, a sea of mire that swallowed their own vehicles whole. Russian soldiers write letters home, not about the tanks or planes, but about the miraculous American Willys that can, quite simply, go anywhere. In the dense, rotting jungles of Burma, larger 2.5-ton trucks are useless. The paths are too narrow, the bridges too weak. Here, the Jeep is the entire supply line. It fords chest-deep rivers, its engine sputtering but never quitting, carrying the wounded of Merrill's marauders and the vital supplies for the push to Myitkyina. The Jeep is now ubiquitous. It's the first vehicle to drive into a liberated Paris, cheered by citizens who see it as the very emblem of freedom. It's seen on the hood of General Eisenhower's command car as he inspects the D-Day beaches. It's the first vehicle to cross the Rhine at Remagen. Its versatility is almost comical. GIs turn it into a high-speed railway car by fitting it with steel-flanged wheels to patrol railway lines. They weld a generator to the engine, creating a mobile power station to run lights for a field hospital. Famously, they discover that the distance between the wheels is a perfect fit for railroad tracks. By 1945, the praise is no longer just from GIs. It's from the men running the entire war. General George C. Marshall, the man who wrote the impossible 49-day request, calls it America's greatest contribution to modern warfare. General Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander, is even more direct. The Jeep, the C-47, and the landing craft were the three tools that won the war. When the final surrender is signed in Berlin, what vehicle do the Allied commanders arrive in? Jeeps. When the Japanese sign the surrender on the deck of the USS Missouri, what vehicles are parked on the docks below, having just liberated prisoners from camps across Asia? Jeeps. By the war's end, Willys and Ford have produced over 643,000 of them. They have served in every theatre, on every front, and in every army of the Allied nations. The goofy little toy that Bantam built out of desperation, the one the army laughed at, has become the single most recognizable and most important vehicle of the Second World War. The war is over. But for the Jeep, the story is just beginning. August 1945. The Philippines. The war is over. The silence is deafening. And the US military is faced with a new logistical problem: what to do with the mountains of equipment left behind. In fields from Manila to Marseille, hundreds of thousands of battle-worn Willys MBs and Ford GPWs sit parked, hubcap to hubcap. They are surplus. Many are simply pushed into the ocean or bulldozed into pits to prevent them from falling into the wrong hands or destabilizing local economies, but thousands more are sold. In the Philippines, local mechanics and entrepreneurs who had witnessed the Jeep's indestructibility buy them for pennies on the dollar. They cut the chassis, weld in benches, add a garishly painted roof, and chrome-plated horses to the hood. They create the jeepney, a new form of mass transit. The military workhorse becomes a vibrant, cultural icon, a symbol of post-war Filipino resilience and ingenuity. Back in America, Willys Overland knows it has an icon on its hands. Soldiers are returning home, not with stories of tanks, but with a deep affection for their faithful Jeep. They want one for their farm, for their ranch, for their hunting trips. Willys sees the future. They take the military MB, add a tailgate, put the headlights back on the outside of the grille, add a more comfortable seat, and paint it in civilian colors. In 1S, they release the Willys CJ2A, the civilian Jeep. It is the first mass-produced, four-wheel drive civilian vehicle in history. The toy, that the army laughed at, has just created an entire category of vehicle, the SUV, the 4x4, the off-road utility vehicle. Every Land Rover, every Toyota Land Cruiser, every Ford Bronco, and every off-road vehicle that follows owes its existence to the Bantam Blitz Buggy. The legacy is absolute. It's in the 7-slot grille, a trademark that became so iconic it is now a globally recognized brand. It's in the round headlights, a face that still defines the concept of freedom and adventure. It's in the word itself, Jeep, a name of disputed origin. Some say it came from the GP designation, for general purpose, slurred together, GP. Others say it was named after Eugene the Jeep, a magical, problem-solving, go-anywhere character from the Popeye cartoons. It doesn't matter. The name stuck, becoming a brand synonymous with capability. It's a bitter irony for Bantam. The company that invented the Jeep never recovered. They built trailers during the war, and, having lost their best engineers and their original design, they faded into obscurity and went bankrupt by 1956. Their reward for their 49-day miracle was to be a forgotten footnote, but their creation lived on. It became a firefighter's truck, a farmer's tractor, a mail carrier's delivery vehicle in the snow-bound mountains. It became the vehicle of choice for explorers, adventurers, and anyone who refused to let the paved road dictate their destination. The story of the Jeep is a story of American desperation, of impossible deadlines, of brutal corporate theft, and, ultimately, of an idea that was so right, so perfect for its time, that it transcended its creators. It began as a 2,030-pound punchline in Butler, Pennsylvania, dismissed by officers who saw a goofy toy. But in the mud of the Ardennes, on the sands of Algiers, and in the jungles of Burma, it became the most important piece of steel in the Allied war machine, a universal soldier that never complained, never quit, and did, impossibly, well.